And what we do understand, some of y'all thought, you know, hair, skull, facial characteristics, y'all went for that, some of you. I know you did. You're not going to admit it now, but I know you did. You thought, yeah, that makes sense. Now, I want to ask you, where do you find people geographically in the world, that have straight blonde hair? Where geographically? Specifically, Scandinavia. So in Scandinavia is where you find the folks with the straight blonde hair. We all know that. How do you explain Aboriginal children being born with straight blonde hair? How do you explain the subcutaneous fold in the eyes of the Bushman and the Kalahari? How do you explain the broad lips of the Eskimo? You see, these things do not distinguish race. They do not. So let's read what DNA has told us now that we can look at it. Race is a concept of society that insists there is a genetic significance behind human variations in skin color that transcends outward appearance. However, race has no scientific merit outside of sociological classification. There are no significant genetic variations within the human species to justify the division of races. Mankind is one. That's the truth. That's what Martin knew. Martin knew intrinsically that mankind was one. And what we're going to talk about today is if in fact it is undeniable that we are one, that we are more alike than we are different. Matter of fact, there is more difference within a culture than outside of it. So in fact, mankind is one. If we follow the one drop rule in reverse, Martin Luther King would be Irish. And yet you laugh. But we bought the other one, didn't we? We bought it. Why did we buy it? We chuckle when we say if we use the one drop rule that Martin would be Irish. But everybody gets to claim if they got a drop of black, do they not? So we got to get into the psychology of why that's so, which I think is greatly impacted by post-traumatic slave syndrome in terms of how we look at and identify ourselves, quote, racially, because it is a myth. It's not true. So now we've got to look at why then. Why then have we suffered so much around the proofs, the bell curve, Shockley, Jensen, phrenology, all of the things to prove a genetic inferiority? Aristotelian concepts of the natural slave, that you are de facto a slave by virtue of your skin color. You were born and intrinsically and inherently a slave, never to be on par with whites. What would prompt such a thing? This is what we have to understand in order to understand why we behave the way we do and what the nature of the injury is. So when I began to look, and I looked closely, I looked at the literature, and I looked at all of the kinds of things that produce these notions socially in society. It's not a hard answer. It's not a hard answer because I believe everything in the dark is coming to the light. Everything is coming to the light. Sally Hemings, we all knew, didn't we? Come on, how long we knew? We always knew about Sally Hemings. And then folks got all twisted and upset when they said, oh, Lord, Jefferson fathered. Oh, Lord, slave black. Oh, no. One of the four found it. Oh, what are we going to do? And then we had Strom Thurmond. It took 100 years to unravel that lie. But it was there, and I just want to know on record, anybody here know a white Washington? Do the math. Do the math. So this has never been a mystery to us. But there is fear. And the only way that love can triumph is in the absence of fear. Because you see, love cannot dwell in a heart possessed by fear. You got to cast that out because that's where faith lies. And so when we start looking at the fear that people have of the truth, because that's what we're talking about, the fear. And the interesting thing about it is Martin talked a lot about truth, light, truth, knowledge, love. He talked about that. And what we have to understand is when he said that there was power in light, he meant that literally. Because if we were to turn all the lights out in this sanctuary, if it was dark in this sanctuary, we turned off all the lights, and there was one candle standing in the doorway, that light would flow in, the darkness would not flow out. Because darkness is an absence of light. You see, and when we start looking at the absence of truth is where we get the fear and we get the ignorance. And so the way we deal with that is you replace it with the truth. And you replace it with courage. And that's what we have to do as we journey through our own healing. So now I begin the discussion of post-traumatic slave syndrome. Well, let's first understand what trauma is. Now, I know you all heard about trauma, and particularly you heard about post-traumatic stress disorder after 9/11. Now, I'm going to submit to you that we knew what trauma was before 9/11. And what people will say, because, I even had people on the radio show, because they say, yeah, but y'all free now. Why are you tripping? Get over it. You know what I'm saying? It's done. You're free. That's what people will tell you, right? And it's interesting, our response, because to me that's an easy response. They say, listen, Joy, I wasn't a slave owner. I didn't do it. I wasn't there. I'm tired of hearing about this. I'm tired of feeling guilty about it. And what I say to those folks is, you know what? I wasn't there either. I'm not a slave, as far as I know. None of my cousins, friends, and associates are slaves. However, we have to understand that approximately 300 years of protracted slavery guaranteed that the progeny of the South, the white progeny, would have wealth and prosperity and privilege. And it guaranteed that the descendants of those stolen away would have debt, servitude, fear, and misery. So it doesn't matter if either of us were there. That is what it produced today. Be clear. And then they say, but Joy, I didn't do it. I marched in the civil rights movement. I said, so what you're saying is that you do not enjoy the rights and privileges of white people, as this white person